Hello, Johnny from Eurogamer here, and this is XCOM The Board Game. Now, this actually launched in 2015, but you might not have played it, owing to the fact in the corner of the box here it says, requires free digital companion app. And I think when a lot of people see the words digital companion app, what they hear is crap gimmick. But those hypothetical people are wrong. XCOM The Board Game is a real treat. Let's start with the basics. Open up the box and you'll find an advert, no need for that, a very slim rules reference sheet because most of it is managed by the game's digital companion app, more on that later, and then we have some tokens to pop out, the game board itself, and then the box turns into an eldritch nightmare. If you like board games, chances are you've already heard of a company called Fantasy Flight Games. Fantasy Flight Games does not care for well-designed box interiors. Anyway, back to the game. Inside you'll find a bag of XCOM and UFO miniatures, a couple of decks of cards, a bag of dice, and then a few more cards. And then we're back to the pointless cardboard insert again. Dispose of this immediately. Now, it's not often I get to say setting up a board game is actually fun, but if it's true of any game, it's true of XCOM, because the first step is to squabble over, and then eventually pick, a role for each of the 4 players. The commander is in charge of keeping track of the XCOM budget and also deploying interceptors to shoot down UFOs. So basically, they're like an accountant with a bunch of fighter jets at their disposal. The chief scientist is in charge of researching new technologies, i.e. creating useful upgrades for the other players and determining which of these technologies should be prioritised. This is the player all the other players should be sucking up to. The central officer is responsible for controlling the app and relaying important information to the other people, which sounds simultaneously stressful and dull, but I promise you, it really isn't. For one thing, you'll have a better idea of what's going on across the board than anyone else except maybe the commander. Second, the more efficiently you do this job, chivying other players along, the more precious seconds you'll have at the end of the timed phase to do extra things, which could make the difference between success and failure. And of course you're going to get a lot of people complaining at you as you describe exactly how much worse the situation is getting with every passing second, but don't worry, it's not your fault. You're just the messenger. And then finally there's the squad leader, who is in charge of managing the XCOM recruits as they both take on missions and defend the base. Now this is the role that's most like playing the video game, including the horrible sense that nothing is fair and the world is only interested in killing your soldiers. Anyway, once you've chosen a role, you sit near the relevant bit of the board and divvy up the assets. They're handily colour-coded, so it's a pretty quick setup. Then you just fire up the companion app and take it from there. Begin round 2, deploying 3, 2, 1, off we pop.
Off we pop.
New technology is available, Chief Scientist. So structurally, XCOM the board game is split into 2 phases, the timed phase and the resolution phase. During the timed phase, everyone gets to do their bits as and when the app tells them. The researcher assigns what technologies they want to research, as well as deciding how many scientists will try to research each one. The squad leader chooses soldiers to either go on a mission or defend the XCOM base and ships them out. And of course the aliens start invading both the skies and the ground, with UFOs appearing on the map and in the XCOM base at unpredictable intervals. Crises also pop up, with the commander having to make snap decisions about what potentially catastrophic event they'd rather face later on down the line. This entire phase is brilliantly tense, as everyone knows they have mere seconds to complete each task before the game rolls on. It calls for each player to be swift and decisive, knowing exactly how they want their corner of the board to perform. During the timed phase, people start talking in really clipped sentences, trying to communicate as efficiently as possible, and once it's over, everyone breathes a huge sigh of relief. And that is my favourite bit about this board game. The second you breathe that sigh of relief and start feeling like you can relax, the resolution phase begins. And that is really when the sectoids start to hit the fan.
Oh!
That is awful.
Oh, they fuck.
They are both dead. In the resolution phase, everything that happened in the timed phase, every decision made under pressure, is resolved in turn. The science officer rolls to see if there's a technological breakthrough or not, the commander rolls to see how many UFOs they can knock out in an attempt to keep panic to a minimum across the different continents, and, of course, the squad leader rolls to see if their lovingly committed soldiers complete their mission or come back in body bags. It's fantastic because so much of it is already locked in, but there's still a chance to make things right. If you neglected to put an interceptor over Asia, for example, that's tough. You can't move it now, but that's not to say you don't have a chance of shooting down every other UFO on the board. It's kind of tempting to think of the resolution phase as the eye of the storm, this little patch of calm in between the more frenetic, timed phases, but really, this is where the true fight is. This is the part of the board game that can either go horribly wrong or brilliantly right, and that lends XCOM the board game this amazing cadence, and it's a cadence, to be honest, that would be completely impossible to achieve without the companion app. Now again, I think it's very easy to be put off by a digital app for a board game, and to be honest, I can understand why. Board games are appealing primarily because they're social experiences that don't require anything digital. But the thing is, the app for XCOM the board game automates just enough of the admin to keep things running smoothly, but it also randomizes things to the extent you never know what's coming next. Let's take UFO invasion for instance. During the timed phase, the app will alert the central officer to incoming UFOs, telling them where to place them on the board. Now, if you were designing this board game again without the app, you could maybe roll dice to do this, having a look on a table to see how many UFOs are flying in and where they're going to land, but that is pretty time consuming. It lends itself more to careful chin-scratching contemplation than the raw gut reaction you get from running things through a strictly timed app. And the other great thing about UFO placement being dictated by the app is that you never know when it's coming or how often. Because during each timed phase, the commander only gets one chance to scramble interceptors. Only once can he or she pick up these tiny little planes and place them on the board. But the problem is when they do this, they don't know how many more UFOs are coming, or when, or where. So their interceptor placement can make complete sense at the time, but then seconds later, it's gone horribly wrong. Having this stuff run through an app designed to randomise events makes XCOM the board game both thrillingly unpredictable and fast. It drives the action onwards all the way through the timed phase, and then it steps back and lets you resolve things in your own time, and then suddenly it's there again, ready to start a new timed phase and do the whole sordid mess all over again until you eventually unlock the final mission and hopefully win, or, as is far more likely, you just lose. And all the while it makes all the right sound effects from the game, and it provides you with an atmospheric soundtrack, and it's even got a comprehensive tutorial for first time players. It's brilliant. Anyway, I mentioned losing. There are two ways to lose at XCOM the board game. Either the base gets destroyed, or two continents fall into full-on panic mode. Some turns it's nigh on impossible to stop yourselves creeping closer to these lost conditions, and at least for your first couple of games, you're almost certainly going to prioritise the wrong things and end up losing. But then my first games of XCOM the board game were a long time ago now, so I'm not really the best person to be talking about this. So instead, I turned to Squad Leader Brat.
So Chris, obviously you're a massive XCOM fan. You reviewed XCOM 2 for Eurogamer.net, in fact.
I did, yeah. But XCOM Anywhere Known is my favourite video game. It's incredible. So yeah, being able to play the board game that that game inspired was a lot of fun, and there were some interesting similarities and differences, I thought. First of all, it is like you have the board game is specifically about the management part of the game.
Yeah.
Anyone going in expecting like the tactical combat stuff, which is a big half of XCOM, that's really not what.
No, it's a very small corner, to be honest, of,
yeah.
of the actual board game, which was your bit. You were the one doing the dice rolls. But
Yeah. Oh, what was my title again? Cool.
Squad Leader.
Squad Leader Brat. Yeah, that was good. And yeah, so really, it's all about the resource management, which is still I think was a smart choice. Yeah, and combining that with like a really strict timer where you're having to like figure out where to send your soldiers in my case, or where to spend money, but you have a time frame to think about.
Yeah,
that.
literal seconds to get everything done.
It's super stressful. It's a really stressful game. So that's a big similarity between that and the actual XCOM. Yeah, just a constant level of like stress.
Yeah.
One of the things I also thought was really similar is that like the first time you played the XCOM the board game, at least for me, just like when I first played XCOM Anywhere Known, you just play it completely wrong. Like it's impossible to know the first time what you actually need to concentrate on. So
yeah,
it's like you don't know what you're supposed to be researching. That happens in both versions of the game, because you don't really know what you don't
know how important satellites are.
Exactly.
Instance, yeah.
And don't really know what you're supposed to be prioritizing. So in my case with the squad leader, and I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about this, there were two bits that I was sort of responsible for, which was sending people out on missions and defending the base. And I sort of prioritized the missions to begin with because there were rewards involved, and I thought, you know, if you complete them, we're building up to the final mission. But the rewards never quite felt like they were worth what I was spending to complete them. Maybe we were just unlucky on dice rolls, but like you'd perhaps like complete a mission which felt quite difficult, only to receive like 2 soldiers back in return. And you'd
probably
lost like 2 or 3 as a result.
Yeah, that's very true. Although we were operating with quite a decent budget surplus for a lot of the game. So I've played other games of this in which we've actually managed to get rolling on the missions, and we've completed a few. And I think the thing about it is, if you do well, it's like the rich get richer. You're able to complete more. But if you're struggling with them, it is a real hard thing. And to be honest, one of your roles was like, your role was easily one of the hardest in the entire game. No, it's true though, because you're trying to manage your troop numbers, and there are never enough, and you're always spread thin on the ground. And especially when you're having to defend the base as well as try and take on
which
these missions.
is I think more important. Well, one, because you can lose the game as a result of not defending the base correctly, which we did. All right, eventually, that's fine. And I think I would have, if I played it again, I'd definitely prioritise that and see the missions as sort of a bonus. Like if I'm doing really well, then we'll go out and have a nice little mission every so often. One thing I would have liked to have seen on that front, because the tactical stuff is so important in the actual game, I would have liked to have seen a little bit of progression within missions. So like so your soldiers can rank up and become veterans, but you do that through training, like outside of the missions. The soldiers themselves don't benefit from going out and killing aliens. I would have perhaps liked to have seen like you know, if they get a couple of kills, then they rank up, and so you feel like, okay, sending them out on that mission was good because now that soldier is better in my base defense.
That's a very good point, actually. The only way really to level up your soldiers is to put them in the officer training
take them out for a turn basically. And,
which is a big ask. And you know, with the aliens, when you kill them, you do get their bodies as salvage, but it's never that great. It's useful for the research guy, but it's never like mind-boggling. I think that's a very valid criticism, actually, that it maybe doesn't incentivize deploying your troops as much as it could do, especially since if you like put 2 or 3 soldiers on one bit of a mission card and you fail that roll, they're all dead.
Yeah, they're all dead.
It doesn't. You're not losing 1 or 2. It's an all or nothing. Which
feels very very brutal. And I also think if you had soldiers ranking up as a result of their actions, it would do the thing that XCOM does so well, which would give you a sense of like ownership over what just happened, and you'd feel like, oh man, I really like this soldier because remember earlier on when they killed those 2 thin men and then ranked up? And then that soldier would feel more important to me, which is something the video game side of things gets perfectly. Yeah,
I mean, you never forget your first favourite soldier. Mine was an assault guy called Chepanov, who was just, he was brilliant. I
named every first soldier Barry Smith, and he never makes it towards the end of the campaign, but it's one of those. That's XCOM. But yeah, overall I thought the board game did some really cool stuff. I'm glad that it focused on management, and I really liked that it gave you a time limit to work within each turn. It keeps the game moving forwards quickly, which is nice, but more than that, it makes you make mistakes, and that's also feels quite important to the game. Like
big time.
Otherwise, you're just basically doing the maths and trying to get everything right, and you know, then it comes down to the dice rolls whether or not they work for you. The fact that you have to do it and you're in a rush means that, you can like muck up along the way.
I think it also keeps everyone's fingers out of everyone else's pies. Because in stuff like Pandemic, where you're watching other people take their goes, it's very easy to go, oh, I think what you should do is this, and everyone's got your move planned out for you by the time it gets around to you if you're a certain role.
I was, towards the start of the game, I was definitely sort of edging towards that with what was being researched, because I wanted stuff for me, obviously. But by the end of it, I was like, I have no idea what's going on outside of my corner of the game. You just, that's great. If you've just researched something for me, thanks very much. So that's a good point. It's good. So it was really good. I had a lot of fun.
And I think, between my inane ramblings and Chris's valid criticisms of how the soldiers level up, that's a pretty good summary of what XCOM the board game is like. It does a lovely job of capturing what makes the video game so tense and exciting, while the app actually provides meaningful structure rather than a tacky gimmick. If you're a fan, it's well worth tracking down, even with that Fantasy Flight box insert. So anyway, thank you very much for watching this review of XCOM the board game. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, we've got plenty more on both board games and XCOM in general. Recently I played Deadly Premonition the board game in prototype, so you can check that out. I also reviewed the Dark Souls board game, and if you are looking for something on XCOM, why not let Chris tell you about how the very first one was actually secretly cancelled. Do like and subscribe if you feel like it, but if not, honestly there's no pressure. Either way, thank you for watching, and have a lovely day.